Hey guys, welcome to Punky's World. This video is a biography of my mom. I was inspired by Alex Archibald of Curiosity Incorporated. Curiosity Inc. Oh, my knee! Yeah, I'm not supposed to bend it like that. Oh, okay. His mother passed away a couple days ago, so keep him in your prayers, his family. It's rough. Believe me, I know. And, the way he biographied her when talking about her passing really inspired me to write a biography of each of my parents. My mom was born Ella Christine Currier on July 23rd, 1954. She was born in Lewiston, Maine. She grew up in Livermore Falls and Byron, Maine. Population 80. I kid you not. Her mom was born in Livermore Falls. Her father was born in Fayette. Mom never met her dad. Later in life, she met her siblings from him. She grew up with a stepdad who thought of her as his own. He was my very German Grampy Schmidt. She got her maiden name from her two older sisters' dad, because that was her mother's last name at the time of her birth. So that became her name. And he never denied her, even to his own children. He said he wasn't there for her like he should have been. My mother was dumbfounded because she was like, I have to do this. She was like, wait a minute. Didn't have to be. You weren't that's what she was thinking. And he did other things for her as well. She was a victim of the times. Being born in the early 1950s and to a mother who was unmarried at the time, she was called a bastard. I am not using that as a swear word. It's not a curse word. It's not it is a bad word in the sense that it means child born out of wedlock. But it has such negative connotations. Excuse me, I need to change the battery. It's different today than it was in those days. I have, excuse me, lots of friends and know lots of people who've had children outside of wedlock. Whose children are not called bastards. It's not called bastardry anymore, which was a crime. So if my grandmother had named my mother's father, he would have been guilty of the crime of bastardry and potentially gone to jail, which would leave 6 other children with no father. So what good would that do? 6 other children he was raising on his own. That wouldn't have helped anybody. And he would have taken my mother is the thing. And I think my grandmother knew that. And he would have raised her along with his other kids. He came to see my mother. But unfortunately, at the time, my grandmother said, look, she has a father who loves her. She loves him. My Grampy Schmidt. And it's true on both ends. He was her daddy. He came into her life when she was a year old. And even though there were issues with her mom along the way, he was her dad. He was her daddy. She found her siblings from her dad, as I mentioned, through DNA testing, and they said, Dad told us he had a daughter in Massachusetts. She said, I wonder how he knew I went to Massachusetts. Because he was evidently following her from afar. because my grandmother had already told him, she's got a dad who loves her. Leave her alone. And so he respected my grandmother's wishes. And so her siblings welcomed her with open arms. And she found out that her favorite librarian in the town of Fayette, it's another town that she lived in, another very tiny town, who was actually a local reporter. She did and this is interesting because I actually have a family member on the other side who also was the same kind of reporter. They call them gossip columnists, but actually it was the society pages back then. So they did the society pages, and it's interesting that I had a Wilson who did that, and then my mother's grandmother. But this was a woman who read her books at the library, who was a sweet woman. And she called her sister from her mother's side, her older sister, and said, "He'll never guess who my grandmother is." And when she told her, my aunt said the same thing my mother did. "That sweet old lady that read us books in the library." Weird. Anyway, my word. And they couldn't stay in Fayette because my mother was twins with her sisters. And her grandmother would have figured out who she was. So, my mother finished high school. She attended some college. And in February of 1973, my mother moved here to Massachusetts to live with her aunt and uncle, her mother's sister, in the tiny village of Manchog, where my father was from. And where I am from. I grew up in Douglas. However, if you ask me where I was born and where I'm from Manchog. I'm as we used to call it when we were in high school, Chagai. That's simple. I was born in Manchog. I finished school in Sutton, living in Manchog. It was so good to come home. Anyway, so if you ask me, that's where I'm from. And it's where my dad was raised, although my dad was born in Connecticut. We'll get into that in his. They got engaged in May and married August 7th, 1973. On August 4th, 1974. Why the heck did I write it? I didn't even realize I wrote that. Oh my goodness. I said it 74 in my head and still wrote 73. 1974. I was born. My mom had just turned 20 and my dad was 30. My mom had turned 20 2 weeks before I was born, and my dad had turned 30 in April. My parents were married for 44 years. My dad passed away 2 days before he would have turned 73 years old. He died April 7th, 2017. Again, they were married just shy of 44 years. That August would have been 44 years. Let's see, is that right? Okay, 73 to 83, 93, 03, 13, 14, 15, 16. Yeah, they would have been 44 years. I have a picture of them at their 40th wedding anniversary party that we held at our cousin's. My mother passed away 4 years later on December 19th, 2021. She was only 67. They would have been married 48 years at that point. Neither one lived to see 50 years, which I thought for sure that they would. Anyway, um, and she died with something she never had growing up. She died with a name. She wasn't a bastard anymore. She had a name. And I made a promise to her. Because we knew for years that her illness was life limiting. And I made a promise to her when we found out her father's last name and everything. And her family wanted her to change her maiden name. But she said, I'd love to, but he's dead and they won't let me because he's dead. To give her what she never had. She always felt like I never had a name. She always said, I don't have a name. And I was bound and determined when she passed away. And I told her this. I said, your obituary, Mom, you will have what you always wanted. You will have a name. And in her siblings' eyes, her name is Mitchell. So on that blanket over there, right there, it says Ella Christine Currier Mitchell. And in her obituary, it said Ella Christine Currier Mitchell. I don't want to disrespect Grandpa Leon. In my world, let me try to explain this. I have 3 grandfathers, and I've told people this. And I told my aunt this, Lynn Currier's daughter. I have 3 grandfathers. I have Grampy Schmidt, who was my Grampy, my love, my heart, my soul. The man who, my whole life, until he died when I was 21, was my grandfather. I have Grandpa Currier, who his son asked my mother one day, because he had generations of children. He had a lot of kids. Said, did he treat you like this when you were little? And my mother was kind of like, thinking, what do I say? And he said, I wasn't there for her like I should have been. And my mother stopped dead in her tracks because she's like, but he wasn't my biological father. She just had his name, so his kids just thought he was her dad. They didn't, there was no, like, step or anything there. It was just, and he came to her when she was in Connecticut visiting her sister, and the state of Maine called and said, can you check on her? And he's like, I can't legally make her leave with me. I can certainly make sure she's okay, and I will, but she's not legally my daughter. So I can't legally force her to go with me, but I will definitely check on her. And he did. Took her to dinner, made sure she was okay, because she was a teenager visiting my aunt in Connecticut, who was barely out of her teens herself, and in the home of someone that the state was somewhat worried about. And so, but he did. He took that responsibility, even though he made it plain to them that he could not force her, because technically he has no rights to her. So I just think that was wonderful. And so he deserves to be Grandpa. And that's why I said I won't take his name out, because he earned that as far as I'm concerned. So that's why it's Currier-Schmidt. Schmidt, oh my God. Currier-Mitchell Wilson. Wilson, of course, being her married name, my father's name. My mother had, she had 6 siblings from her mother, 4 girls and 2 boys. I forgot my aunt. was thinking 3 girls and the 2 boys, but no, she actually had 4 girls and the 2 boys, because she had her sister that she found that had been adopted. And her father had 4 girls and 2 boys as well. One of his boys we never met because he had died. But the other boy I'm very close to. His picture pops up on my digital picture frame. Matter of fact, it just popped up. Him and his wife and me. Gosh, I'm tiny. Anyway, for those of you who don't know, I'm 4 feet 8 inches tall. I'm short. I'm little. So, and I did not get that from my mother. I got that from both of my grandmothers. They were both very short. Like barely over 5 feet tall. My grandfather wasn't terribly tall on the Wilson side either, but his father was 6'3", and his 2 younger boys, my Uncle David and my Uncle Richard, both got the Wilson height from their grandfather. They're both way taller. My father, however, got his height and body shape from his dad. He would hate me saying that because he didn't like his dad, but for, understandable reasons, but yeah. And my uncles on my mother's side, my Grampy Schmidt's sons, are both extremely tall, like 6.5 feet tall. I kid you not. Because my grandfather was like 6'5", 6'6". My grandfather was a very tall man, but he wasn't biologically my grandfather, even though he will always be my grampy. He will always be my heart, my love. And losing him was devastating. And I'll never forget it because, well, we knew he had been sick. He was 85. And my grandmother called because they had been moved from the farm to elderly housing, to an apartment, which must have been so weird for them. And we had gone up to see my grandfather in the hospital the previous summer. And my grandfather was more than a little bit confused. He got out of his bed and told my father he had to go water the chickens, which is a little weird. And my father's like, Dad, I'll take care of it. And he blocked him from leaving the room, and he got him back into his bed. And, yeah, Grandpa had some dementia going on. He also had suffered several strokes. He, like me, had tuberculosis. We both had latent tuberculosis. And I'm coughing because my nose is running down my throat because there's something blooming and my nose isn't liking it. And I've been blowing it all day. Anyway, so neither one of us were contagious. We didn't get it from each other. They told us he got it from the raw milk on the farm, and that's probably where I got it from. My mother probably had it too. They just never tested her. Matter of fact, I would almost be 100% that she had it. And so we'd seen him, and he wasn't well. He went into the nursing home after that, and it was funny because when I saw him, he looked at me, "You haven't grown a bit," and when I went to his funeral, I saw my uncle. Um, the younger of, no, he's the older of the two boys. The older of the two boys who is handicapped and deals with mental issues, and so has to be in a residential program. And they had brought him to his dad's funeral, and he looked at me. He didn't really know a lot of the people because of his state, but he looked at me and he said, "You haven't grown a bit." Exactly what his father said to me the last time I saw him. It was so weird. My mother and I both laughed. I said, "You realize that's the same thing Grampy said to me? Haven't grown an inch or a bit, something like that." It was just funny that what he said to me was the same thing that Grampy had said to me. And I just, um, but I remember Grampy's passing because a week or two before, I had gone to a wrestling show. My mother had curled my hair and I was looking good. And I went to a wrestling show, got to sit in the front and communicated with Shawn Michaels, which was amazing. And this was in February of 1995. And we got the call maybe a week, somewhere between a week and 2 weeks after the wrestling event. I was flying high, and I came crashing back to earth when my grandmother called, said that my grandfather had passed away. And so we pretty much packed up and left the next morning. Um, Made sure our cats were, taken care of, and our landlady, who was a grandmother to me in a lot of ways, took care of the cats. She made sure they were fed and everything. And yeah, that was absolutely terrible. And we went up, and we had a nice pre-funeral talk that night, uh, with my my uncle, my aunts. We all got together at Grammy's, and I just, uh, it was nice. And my grandmother's brother, my great uncle, his kids, and well, they were grown, of course. They're much older than me. They're old enough to be my parent. I'm not kidding. Well, that makes sense. I mean, my grandmother's daughter is my parent, so why wouldn't her brother's kids? Duh. Anyway, yeah, so they're my mother's cousins, and everybody was there. So, at any rate, I've had the privilege to sit in her great uncle, my mother's great uncle's rocking chair, which will be the picture in the thumbnail, by the way. Um, I've been awed by actors portraying my ancestors, her ancestors, who came over on the Mayflower, because they were a big deal. Um, I have seen her great great grandfather's desk and touched it. I've taken pictures of it. I mean, that's just awe inspiring. I'm gonna put this in here. This is a genealogy notebook anyway, so it makes sense, right? Cox Pines. Okay, I gotta do my dad's. right there. I hope you enjoyed this. Hopefully, I won't babble on as long with my dad. Um, God bless you. Have a wonderful rest of your day. I will see you next time. Please subscribe. God bless you. Bye, guys.